Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and joining me today is County Board Chair Christian Dorsey. We're going to be taking a closer look at the key actions the board took at its April meeting, actions that can have a big impact on you, your neighborhood, and our community. Christian, thanks for being here, as always. Now, of course, this was a big meeting with the adoption of the budget, so let's dive right in. What were the highlights with the budget actions?
Well, the top line, Kara, is that the board unanimously approved a $1.4 billion balanced budget. In order to do so, we did have to increase the real estate tax rate 2 cents. That's significantly less than what we advertised at a 2.75 cents increase. But this was necessary because we had incredible needs, particularly from our public schools. And in fact, 1.5 of the 2 cents is devoted to meeting the gap that our public schools presented to us. Fortunately, we were able to maintain the tax rate increase for county services to the ½ cent that the manager recommended, which required finding $2 million for metro funding. That was a need that we had, but we were able to figure out how to trim our budget so that we could accommodate that within the manager's proposal. And generally, we were able to fund all the things that make Arlington work as a community, and that means maintaining our investments in affordable housing. It also meant listening to our community, who presented some deep concerns about some of the proposed cuts to arts and cultural affairs. So while I am happy that we're able to provide a continuity of great services for Arlington, we recognize that a tax rate increase certainly can cause a hardship for some.
Now, you did mention some of the proposed cuts, and we've been talking the last couple of months how this was going to be a very lean budget year because of some of the extenuating circumstances with the real estate vacancy rate, that kind of thing that we're facing right now. But will the public notice any changes as a result of some of those proposed cuts, or will we be able to alleviate some of those issues?
Well, generally, I think to most of our public, they will see a continuation of the great services that Arlington is known for. So what we were able to do was find a lot of savings that are not going to affect the delivery of most of our core and essential services. So that's the great thing for our community. But we've also been working very hard to make sure that we find every dollar possible that will be used to work productively for Arlingtonians so that we could limit that tax rate increase, because certainly while Arlington is overall very well positioned, we certainly recognize that some people face economic hardships, and we want to reduce that burden as much as possible.
Now, you did mention the majority of the tax rate increase funding is going to go towards schools.
That's right.
And actually, it ends up being more than the manager had originally proposed.
Right. That's right.
What was the need behind that?
Well, so we asked the manager in constructing the budget to make sure he accounted for enrollment growth as well as the new school programs that were going to be opening in September of this year. And he was able to do that. But when the school board put together their budget, they found needs in above and in excess of that. And they presented a compelling case that their investments in making sure that students' emotional health needs were met, making sure that they don't have to cut some of the wonderful opportunities that create for a more equitable school system. They presented a case that they needed more funding for that, and fortunately we were able to scrub the budget, modify a tax rate increase so that we could meet those needs.
And how about the public input? There was a lot of opportunities for the public to make their voices heard, and as Arlingtonians routinely do, they did in fact make their voices heard. What were some of the things you did hear from the community that perhaps helped to shape the final budget?
Well, we certainly heard a lot about arts and cultural affairs. The manager's original proposal dramatically changed the county's investment in those efforts. And once we heard from our public and the board chewed it over, we realized that there wasn't enough of a plan to transition from where we are to something that's a lot more efficient along the lines of what the manager proposed. So we've decided to challenge the manager to deliver the same level of services, some less money devoted to them, but generally we want to make sure we continue our investment in arts and cultural affairs, because that produces such a great return to Arlingtonians overall. And this will lead to a path of, I think, greater sustainability in our arts and cultural affairs funding.
And, as you set those guidelines for the manager looking forward, kind of looking into your crystal ball a little bit as we move forward, of course, with the announcement of Amazon, we're going to see some of that additional revenue down the line.
Yeah.
But in the near term, the next year or two, say, are these things that Arlingtonians are going to have to get used to?
I think so. The Amazon is going to have a very gradual build out in Arlington, so we can't expect any huge revenue windfalls from that right away. But already we've seen greater health in the commercial real estate market than we had predicted a year before. So if that trend continues, these lean, tough budget years will become less lean and less tough. And that's a good thing. Doesn't mean that we're not going to sharpen our pencils just like we did this year, next year, but I do hope some of that great pressure will be relieved a little bit so that we can get toward where I want to be, where we can have a budget that meets our needs, makes good strategic investments in the future, while keeping the tax rate manageable for people so that they get a lot of value for their tax dollars.
All right. Well, on that note, we are going to take a short break. And when we return, we'll talk about some of the many other actions the board took at its April meeting. Stay with us.